Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Galatians with Bjorklund.
Taking a step back and looking at Galatians 4 as a whole, it again deals with this idea of an heir coming of age from the feeling of slavery, in other words, rules and regulations, into the fullness of being a child or an heir. And as a way maybe just to try to explain this, understand this, you think about parenting, because again, this is the idea, the person who was the guardian would have been assigned to guard a young person until they were of age. And you think about parenting, and why do you give your kids rules? You don't give them rules so that they'll live by those rules for the rest of their life. You give them rules so that they learn how to regulate themselves so that they can live without the rules, but they can live wisely. For example, if you have young children, you probably have some kind of a bedtime. Maybe you don't, but most parents will have some type of a bedtime. It may not be perfectly articulated, but it's when we go to bed, you go to bed. And obviously as kids get older, that changes. But you have something there. And part of why you do this is if kids had no structure, no bedtime, no wake time, what would happen is they may choose to just live unregulated, and what you're wanting them to do is learn to regulate themselves. You may, when they start school, say, when you come home from school, we're going to do homework before we play. That may not be your standard. You may say, hey, we'll do homework before bed or something. But again, you give them structure, not so that they live by the structure, but so that they learn, I have to somehow prioritize getting my homework done. I need to regulate my self-care and my sleep myself, because if I don't do it, no one will do it for me. And what you're doing is you are helping your child learn something so that then they can live by the Spirit, if I can use the spiritual analogy. So what is profound here on the other side again of this is that the idea of the law here being used very specifically for kind of the Old Testament Torah law, and we could say somewhat generically the standards of God through the Old Testament. What it was used for was to help people see their need for a Savior, their inability, but also to set in them a course so that they could say, now I don't need to live by the law because I have the Spirit. And here's what's profound on the other side, spiritually speaking, if you grant kind of what I'm saying. And again, there are some immutable Old Testament laws, some New Testament laws. Thou shalt not murder is not something you go, well, that's somewhat, that was for then, and now I can live by the spirit of it, because the spirit of it is actually much harder than the law. And this is again part of what's profound here on the other side of this is it's much easier to go back and live by rules than it is to live by the Spirit. Meaning it's easier to say, well, I didn't kill anybody, than it is to say, well, Jesus takes that law and he says, well, if you say, you fool, you empty head, you violated this. It's much easier to say, just tell me what it is that you want me to do and I do it, than it is to say, well, what pleases you in every way? If my wife were to say to me, hey, we have an anniversary coming up. Here's a gift that I would like you to give me. And she sends me a link and I go get the gift. That is easy. I can do that. I can click on something, make the purchase of something she picked out. It is much harder to figure out what my wife might want, go out and find it, select it, bring it home, surprise her, and delight her by knowing her so well that I say, this is something that would be good for you. And I want to show that to you rather than just doing what you say. This is the law or the flesh and the spirit dichotomy. And it is easier to live by the rules than it is to live by the Spirit, but it is free to live by the Spirit, because the greatest joy is ultimately coming to a point where you can say, I'm so in tune with God that I am trying to honor him and choose things that are for his glory, for my good. And it's bigger and more robust than the rules. And sometimes the old rules, like bedtimes and when I do homework, aren't going to actually fit what's most pleasing when it's not a rule that is embedded in created order, God's character, when it's more of a cultural norm. And so the freedom that you get of saying, I am pleasing Christ with my life, is actually more joyful but more difficult than it is to simply say, tell me the rules and let me live it.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.